Good morning, everybody. It's a cold November day here in northern Utah. And some of you have asked me to do a video about bats, and specifically the relation with bats to giant ground sloths. And you know what? It's actually something I'm well versed in, and it goes into everything. We're talking about everything. We're going to be talking about the Ice Age. We're going to be talking about Mimbres pottery of bats. We're going to be talking about Mayan lore. We're going to talk about archaeology in the Northwest and the Southwest and Mesoamerica. This video is going to cover a lot of stuff. And I didn't exactly know where to start. So let's talk about bats in general. Bats have a rich history with humans. They've been around since at least the Eocene. We have bat fossils going back to the Eocene, not long after the dinosaurs. So bats have been around for a long time. They've been doing their thing. There's a lot of different kinds of bats. There are most bats eat insects. There are bats that eat fruit. And there are bats that hunt birds and mammals. So, for example, and I'll get to this species more later, the spectral bat in the New World is the largest species of bat in the New World. This is a species that is so large that it actively hunts rodents, and it hunts birds and small parrots, catches them and eats them. It's pretty big. Nowhere near as big as the flying foxes of the Old World, the big giant fruit bats with like 3 to 6 foot wingspans that are diurnal and eat fruit. Way bigger way smaller than those, but still a large bat. So that's our largest bat in the New World. But again, there's a wide range of bats. And if you've seen some of my other videos, I visit caves and I like to teach about bats. Most commonly here we have Townsend big-eared bats in Utah. That's the most commonly seen. But there's a wide range of bats, big and small, all different ways of life. Now they're kind of creepy. People have mostly been creeped out by them. We see them in the mythologies of people all over the world. People have, because you got to think, we have lights today. But in the old world, you wouldn't see them. You just like at night, in the daytime, you can see a bird, you can hear a bird, you can wrap your head around a bird. But at night, it's dark. Maybe you have a little moonlight, maybe you see these bats coming out, maybe you see a silhouette. What are these? And maybe on a rare occasion, you might encounter one up close. What is this? It's it's kind of like a rodent, but it's flying, and the membrane looks a little obscene. It kind of looks like a little raw, uncooked sort of look to some of the skin, that stretchy skin. It probably had a strange visceral effect on people. So for the most part, a lot of people's had sort of a scary approach to bats. They were kind of these strange night creatures. They hang upside down. That seems unusual. They're kind of usually a creature of darkness, not always. Now in Papua New Guinea, they're just hunted like a regular animal. They make these big old giant nets and catch these bats with like 6 foot wingspans and eat them just like as a normal food source. So, for some people, that's the way they're viewed. It's just like, this is food. We have, of course, the most famous view of bats in kind of a dark way that's most kind of shared throughout the world is the idea of Count Dracula. Count Dracula is loosely based off of Vlad Dracul, Vlad the Impaler, who has nothing to do with bats. And Dracula from the novel is supposed to be someone who drinks the blood of humans. Now there's all kinds of mythological creatures like that. This has absolutely nothing to do with vampire bats. Vampire bats are 100% a New World species. And the Old World ideas of vampires, they're bloodsuckers. But then in the New World, when there's a bat that sucks blood, it's a vampire bat. They didn't just call it a vampire, it's a vampire bat, because a vampire was already an established Old World idea. So we get that mixed up. People say, oh yeah, it's these ideas that Count Dracula would turn into a vampire bat. No, in the book, he could turn into all kinds of things, including bats, but he wasn't a vampire bat. He was a bat who in human form was a vampire. It's an important difference. But when we get into this, I want to talk, before I get into the mythology, I want to talk about how did vampire bats come to be, because it's a fascinating and unexpected way. So, most bats hunt insects, and most bats go and catch insects. They'll catch them in the sky. Well, I'm not gonna put images of these because it's gross. I don't want you to be grossed out by this. There's a type of insect called a botfly. Botflies will pierce through the skin of an animal, lay their eggs inside, and then the larva will hatch under the skin and start to eat out and pupate, and then they're kind of sticking their heads out, and then eventually they'll come out and they leave this open festering wound. They spread a lot of diseases. They're really bad, but botflies are a thing, and unfortunately so. They're just a part of nature. Well, it seems that anciently in the New World, both South America, Central America, Mexico, and North America, there were giant ground sloths. Some of these, like Megatherium, were as big as elephants. Now, these giant ground sloths, we know from trackways that they could walk on 4 legs with their front hands kind of down, curved under, sort of like a gorilla. But they could also walk on their hind legs. We have trackways showing this as well. This is a Megatherium. This is a giant ground sloth. Enormous animal. And if you look at this right here, you notice there's no front teeth. There's just these back molars. This animal had a big nose, but clearly would have had prehensile lips to go ahead and grab and pull down foliage from up in the trees and eat it. These are the eyes down here. So remember Sid the Sloth from Ice Age, how his eyes were on the side of his head, even though it's a stylized sloth. It's actually true. These guys were enormous. Here's a claw of one. This is from the Ocala River in Florida, and this is just this bone right here. Doesn't seem like we're talking about bats. We'll get to them in a second. This is all connected. This is the bony core. Keratin grew over this, a keratinous sheath that probably came out several feet. If we base it off of tree sloths, and we see how long their claws are based off of the bony core, then yeah, this is probably a 2-foot long claw coming clear all the way out to here. This is enormous. Look at this. I mean, this dwarfs the claws of a T-Rex or an Allosaurus or any of these meat-eating dinosaurs. Absolutely dwarfs it. But this is largely a herbivore. We have done studies and have shown they occasionally scavenged meat as well to supplement and eat some protein. But mostly this is a plant eater, so there's these huge claws to bring down branches and eat. The funny thing is, these things lived in caves. Now we know in North America, like caves in Utah, Nevada, and Colorado, and Arizona, we have caves where we find their remains in. And there's a wide range of these. Some of these are as small as a grizzly bear, small, and some of these are, again, as big as an elephant. But these caves will have the skeletons of these sloths in them, but they will also have heaps and piles of their dung balls. And these are not fossilized. These are so recent. This is such a recent extinction that there are these giant dung balls. It's just in these caves, just dried out, where these sloths lived and pooped for millennia. So it's pretty cool to think that they were here. But in South America, there were no caves. And so these giant ground sloths dug their own caves out of these giant clay deposits. And you think about it, if you have a full hand of these with these giant claws, that's not hard work to just dig in. You know, I'm amazed. One time I saw a badger. I was driving home one night and on a dirt road, and I saw a badger. I got out and looked at it, got right close to it. I hope I saw the video clip. I'll show a video clip of it if I still have it. But he was digging through this dense, compacted clay, and he would just go right through it. And they have claws just like a giant ground sloth, and he would just power through it. So these giant ground sloths must have just, but you go to these caves, you can go in them today. They're enormous, and you can see the claw marks where they just claw these things open. You can just walk right in, full upright. I mean, you could walk an elephant through these things. They're huge. So they made these dens, and they would sleep in them. Sloths are in the family Xenartha. And Xenarthrans they have a difficult time with thermal regulation compared to other mammals. They're kind of, that's why they're kind of slow. Their metabolisms are slow. So today this is your anteaters and your armadillos, which includes the extinct Glyptodon families, which are like these armadillos as big as a car, and your tree sloths and your giant ground sloths. So it makes sense that they would want to live in a cave, or they would want to carve their own cave out, because that helps with thermal regulation. So here's where the vampire bats come from. So if you are a bat, if you see today, even today, tree sloths, which are cousins of ground sloths, tree sloths, they will, there's insects like there's bot flies and there's flat flies that will just live off of them, and they'll just go along with them wherever they go. It was the same thing, that there were these species that were like, well, hey, I'm a bat, I eat insects, and if I'm on this giant ground sloth, I just ride around on it instead of flying. I'll just ride around on this giant ground sloth, and everywhere he goes, there's always bugs on him for to eat, including bot flies. So if a bot fly burrows through, lays the eggs, and the eggs hatch, there's a little larva sticking out, you just go over there and eat that grub, pull it out. Disgusting, but it's what they did. Now, over time, they co-evolved with the giant ground sloths, because now you have this open wound, and eventually these vampire bats living on the back of a giant ground sloth, they go in these caves, because it makes sense. That's probably where the bats first found the sloths, in the caves, and then they're, oh, land on this guy. Oh, there's a bug on him. I'll eat this bug. The sloth goes out, sloth comes in, you just stay on his back, and you just hunt. And these open wounds from these botfly larvae, these provide blood. So if you've eaten all the insects off of this giant ground sloth, then you just go back to those wounds and you reopen them and you start licking up the blood. Now, living just off of blood is very rare for a vertebrate animal. There are very few animals who do that. But vampire bats co-evolved with giant ground sloths to be bloodsuckers. Now, eventually, let's see. Oh, you know what? I just sent one of my friends to do a recording of it. So we're going to take a look at this. We're going to take a look at this vampire bat skull. Now, vampire bats, the teeth are, they overlap, and they're sharp as a surgical instrument. They're able to just do a little nick, and then they make a cut so quick you don't even feel it. And then they start to lap up your blood. Their saliva has an anticoagulant agent. So normally if you have an open wound, your blood goes, oh no, there's a wound, we got to coagulate and stop the bleeding. This has an anticoagulant chemical to keep you bleeding, bleeding. They just lap it up. That's what they do. So they could hunt other animals, but they were built they co-evolved with giant ground sloths. Now, I don't know if you noticed, but giant ground sloths went extinct. Most of the megafauna of South America, because vampire bats like it hot, they like it tropical. They don't come up into the United States. They didn't, the animals that they ate off of are mostly extinct, and there's mostly small animals. So there was a huge decrease in the numbers of vampire bats. Now we know there also used to be at least one other extinct vampire bat called Desmodus draculae, and he was substantially larger. Still not a giant, but a much larger bat, and probably a wingspan about like this big. For a bat, that's pretty big. And this vampire bat, this giant vampire bat, also, was found in the same caves where we find giant ground sloth remains. So they were living off of giant ground sloths. Giant ground sloths go extinct, and now they have to go after smaller prey. Smaller prey is more likely to notice you're chomping on them. Not always, but so we know that after the end of the Ice Age, vampire bat populations plummeted. But then we know humans in recent times introduced domestic animals to the tropics of the Americas, such as cattle. And so all of a sudden there's rich food sources, and I'll show you some video clips of vampire bats climbing around on a cow, not even knowing it's on it. And it's pretty wild to see this, to just see these guys just running around, just chomping on them and not even knowing. They'll tackle chickens. They'll come up and do a little nick in the foot of a chicken and drink the blood out of it. And they'll even, I've watched a video clip of them doing this in the nest of an orange-breasted falcon, which is surprising. So vampire bats are, because of this, they have evolved to be good at walking and running. which is not normal. Most bats, they hang upside down and that's it. And if they're on the ground, they're like, ugh, they're really awkward. Vampire bats have learned to hop and run and jump around, and they have a musculature built for it. So if you look at video clips of them running and jumping and sprinting, even running sideways, these scientists do crazy tests where like, we're going to put them on a treadmill. They're pretty incredible for what they are able to do. So you don't have any other bat that has this sort of terrestrial mobility. It's pretty cool. So that's a little bit of background of vampire bats, first where they came from, and how they came to be, directly connecting to giant ground sloths. And again, I think there's 3 recognized vampire bat species alive today. There were at least 4, because Desmodus Dracula used to be here. So what about people? What about the impact on people? Well, first of all, we know in Mesoamerica, bats are everywhere. Bats are viewed as very bad. And again, remember, the largest bat in the New World is the spectral bat. This is a hunter, and it's the one that hunts often in the daytime. And so this is something that is going to be seen. Now, if you look at the depictions of the bats that you see in Mesoamerica, most of these either look like either a spectral bat or a vampire bat. So these are the bats that are on their minds. There's many other species there, but these are the bats that are on their mind. Now, in Mesoamerican theology, there is an underworld, and it's called Xibalba, and it's a very dark place, and all the lords of death are there, and all their names are like, dealing with everything that's gross and nasty and painful and horrible. All their names. I'll do a video on the scripture, Mayan scripture sometime, and talk about the lords of death. But Camazotz is one of the lords down there. There's all these vampire bats that'll cut your head off. These giant vampire bats that'll just cut your head off and drink your blood right out of your neck. And so Camazotz is often depicted, and he's revered. Feared but revered. So we see this icon all over again and again. We see it on pottery, we see it in mugs, and we see it, we see it in stone carvings. Again and again and again, we see this image of Camazotz. So this was very much bats being a very negative thing, but something to be celebrated. It's not like negative, like, ooh, we don't talk about it, but it's like, oh, yes, this is bad, and we do talk about it, and we do put this icon all over. Sometimes you have things where the idea is associating with something that's bad is good. So, for example, in ancient Egypt, Seth, or Set, the god of evil, when Egypt was at times of a lot of war, then you would have Seti. Like, Seti means son of Seth. It's like, well, that's kind of like son of the devil. Why would you want that? It's trying to associate yourself with like a dark power, like I'm powerful, I'm dark, I'm connected to this, don't mess with me. It could have been something like that as well. We're not sure, but we know that bats were revered and depicted all over in Mesoamerica. What does that have to do with the Southwest Northwest region that I'm always teaching about? Okay, well, we don't have a written language left over from the ancestral Puebloan people, the Chakawans, the so-called Anasazi, the Fremont, any of these people. We don't have a written language left that said what they thought. And unfortunately, there's very little, there is some, but there's very little figurative depiction. Most of this region, we see a lot of Zentangle patterns. We see a lot of beautiful ceramics with cool patterns. And I've done a video a bit on that too, on where those patterns actually can come from, a lot of them. So that's cool. That doesn't tell us what they were thinking per se. Well, Mimbres pottery from the Mimbres region. Mimbres is part of the Mogollon culture, and Mogollon goes all the way down even into Paquime in Mexico, in Chihuahua, Mexico. So Chihuahua, Mexico, then all up into the Southwest United States. The Mimbres pottery, for whatever reason, this style, they decided to do a lot of actual figurative depiction, depicting things they were thinking and seeing, and depicting their stories and their legends. And we see a ton of bats. We see tons and tons and tons of bats in these pots, and disproportionately so. How often are you going to see a bat? You might see one flying at sunset. You're not seeing them because you're asleep. So you're not seeing bats. So why are bats so prevalent? So I want to put out there, work has already been done connecting Mimbres pottery to scenes from the Popol Vuh, from the Mayan scriptures of Popol Vuh. Now, I have also shared how much things such as Shiprock, New Mexico, the legends about it directly correlate with legends of the hero twins in the Mayan Popol Vuh. We know trade was happening from Central America and Mexico up to the southwest region of today. We know trade was going on. We know there was trades of cacao beans. We know there was trades of copper bells. We know that elaborate shells from the Pacific were consolidated and traded up and south. We know live macaws, scarlet macaws and military macaws and thick-billed parrots made these trade routes. And sadly, we also know that there was a slave trade from the north heading south, where tribes were enslaving some of the Puebloans and selling them down to Mexico to like the Zapotec and the Aztec and things like that. So trade of goods and trades of people, human trafficking, was happening. So was the trade of ideas. And we see all kinds of ideas of religious icons that come up. Pottery Mound in New Mexico, those kivas, which I've done a video on, show a lot of images that show people all over holding macaws. It's like, this is New Mexico. What are you doing holding macaws? And images that very much seem to be related to Mesoamerica. We know these ideas made them up, and we know some of the ideas up here made it down. Exchange of ideas, things kind of change, things sort of, things always do. Things always change and evolve and adapt. Like here in America, everybody celebrates Christmas in December, which the birth of Christ is supposed to be in April, but Christmas is connected to the winter solstice, which is pagan, but it's like, these amalgamated, and now it's like, well, we're going to celebrate this holiday at a totally different time of year. People change ideas and adapt and evolve. And I very much believe that all of these bat images in this Mimbres pottery represent a larger lexicon of an idea. I do absolutely believe that the idea of bats being a symbol of darkness were more permeated through the Southwest, but because most tribes just depicted, in geometric patterns, we don't have that representation. But that doesn't mean it wasn't still there, because boy, it was there in Mimbres, and I think it was elsewhere as well. Now, that's a hypothesis, that's a theory, but it's a good one, and it's based off of evidence, off of circumstantial evidence. So what I'm postulating, what I'm suggesting here is that the Mesoamerican ideas of vampire bats and bats in the underworld, and bats being these creatures of darkness, but still being creatures that should be depicted and revered and honored, and maybe even offerings made to, that this idea, or a diluted version of that idea, did make its way all the way up to what is currently the southwest United States and northwestern Mexico, and that these people there also had these similar ideas about bats. And I think it shows. So I would love to hear your thoughts on this, and I hope you enjoyed learning a little bit more about where vampire bats actually came from. I think it's fascinating. I have studied the Mayan scripture, the Popol Vuh, for years in great depth, and just the icons of these underworld bats from Xibalba are very powerful icons. When you actually read how they behave there, it's quite terrifying and quite exciting, quite exhilarating. You got to think too, for the Maya, there was a literal underworld. Most of Maya landscape is just flat, and then it's all built on limestone, and anywhere there's a sinkhole, there's caves. There's cenotes with water, and then there's these caves that go outward, and this is the underworld. There's literally gateways to the underworld. And what's down in this underworld? Bats. And what's one of the bats that comes out from there? Vampire bats. And what do vampire bats do? They drink your blood. I think vampire bats are so cool. It's kind of strange. I've listened to other biologists speak on this who have specialized in it, and they said, you know what? If vampire bats went extinct, it would be just fine. They actually don't do any good. They're not really a food source of any level that it matters. They spread a lot of disease, and by biting animals and spreading those diseases, which that's not good. There's not very many of them, so it's not like they're having a huge impact by being eaten by other animals. So it's one of those animals where very rarely where if they went extinct, it really wouldn't have a tangible impact at this point on the environment. But that being said, it's kind of cool knowing that we got living monsters. That there are these flying mammals, these literal vampires that want to suck your blood. I don't want to be bit by one, but I think it's cool that they're out there, and I think they're amazing life forms, and it's cool that they have led to this inspiration. And then again, that these old world ideas of vampires have amalgamated with the actual vampire bat in the new world to where now they're synonymous, when there are no vampire bats in the Eastern Hemisphere. They're all in the West. So that's the only place we have them. And yet they've come together. Just like I said, these ideas, these theological and religious and symbolic ideas will come together, and then they mesh and they become one. And you cannot say vampire bat without thinking of Dracula. You can't think of Dracula without thinking of a vampire bat. And the two are 100% unrelated, but have come together. So let me know your thoughts. I would love to know your perspectives on all of this, and I hope you enjoyed this kind of odd deep dive, and thank you for the suggestion to make this video. And yeah, I would love to know your views, and if you know of any other pottery or ceramics or have any other examples of bats being depicted in the New World, I think it's really great. So hope you enjoyed that. If you haven't already, if you could hit subscribe, and always remember that life is a gift. So never stop learning and never stop exploring. We'll see you next time.